Welcome back to the channel. As you see on the screen, what I want to show you today is the most challenging challenge coin display that I was asked to create yet. This video will be a little bit longer than usual. I'm going to include all the steps from the request to the design in Vectric Aspire to end-to-end build on the CNC and the finish. The request was for a display that would hang on the wall in the chief's office, include their logo from the local chapter of the Fraternal Order of Leatherhead Society, fire department themed, and hold at least 60 coins. Okay, we're going to go through the steps of building this in Vectric at a very high level. If you need more detail, leave me a message and I'll get back to you. But this is starting with the Maltese cross, just a direct import from an SVG, do a trace of it. As you can see, I put everything on layers here. So what I did was this, I just kind of traced it. So I've got the 4 wings, again, so I can build them independently because my CNC is not big enough to do all of these as one piece. And then what I'll do is I'll put mounting holes in here so that it can mount to the centerpiece that's going to house the logo. Then I also like to label these because A, B, C, D, so you know which side to mount them on. And then this is to give you a simulation of what the coins would look like. I'll zoom in a little bit for you here. You can see they all easily fit 1.5 to 2 inch coins, and on the top rows they can fit 2 1/4 and even bigger. You can do some very large coins in there if you want to. And then the very last thing would be the logo in the middle, and we'll go through that and in a future step on doing that as a centerpiece with multicolored epoxy pour. Here is the breakdown of the 4 wings of the Maltese cross for the coins. I've got 2 on each piece of a Baltic birch 3/8 plywood. It makes it a lot easier to set up this way. You'll see that I also do a shallow engraving of the letters as well as those little lines on there. That helps me in the glue up phase. Just makes things a lot simpler. I won't bore you with the whole CNC video, but here's a good shot showing you the holes that it's doing that mount it to the centerpiece, the letter A on this wing, so you can kind of see where this one belongs in the complete set. And in the background behind the spindle, you see the curve line and the straight lines. Those are for lining up the angle pieces when you get to the glue up stage. When this part is complete, you'll end up with 4 pieces like this, A, B, C, D. That'll be the back planes for the angle parts to mount on. Next up, we're going to carve the angle pieces that hold the pegs and the coins that glue to the back of the wings that we previously cut. It's a pretty simple Vectric job. You're doing a profile and a little pocket to carve the holes that hold the shelf pins. All right, after you run that carving job on a piece of 3/4 inch stock, one of the things I like to do is label the parts so I know where they go. As you can see, we're going to end up with like 32 pieces of angle cuts, so I just want to make sure I know exactly where they're going to glue up and where they belong to. For the next step, after we've cut what I called all the angle pieces, we actually have to put an angle on them. And it has to be somewhere greater than 12 or 13 degrees because that's the angle where coins will lean back and not fall off the wall. So I usually like to pick 14 or 15 degrees, and you just set in the table of that, and then we'll go cut them. All right, so here I just wanted to show you on the table saw cutting the back side of each of these 32 pieces with that 14 to 15 degree angle. Just be consistent at 14 or 15. That's all you need to make sure of, that you're doing that consistently. And one of the cutoffs, or a couple of the cutoffs that you see that come off the saw, make sure you save a couple of those. You're going to need those to fill in some of those angles at the tops of each of the wings. All right, and the bottom piece, as you can see, and sometimes the top piece, we have to cut that same 15 degree angle so that they butt up together. Easiest way to do that is take one of the 15 degree cutoffs that you have. I know you can bevel the table, but I use this 15 degree cutoff and slide and sand it that way. Here we go. And now you can see with the 15-degree bevel, lines up perfectly. A little sanding, glue it down, we're good to go. So here we are getting ready to attach the angled slats onto the backplane. And as you can see earlier, I talked about these grooves that I created. These help us align these slats as we apply them. So let's go ahead and get started. And what we'll do is I like to start in the middle. It just makes, it seems to line up a lot better when I start in the middle. So if we do this, we put the first one, line it up on the lines. We can do a little adjusting as time goes. Work our way forward and back. They can overlap a little, it doesn't really matter. We're going to trim it at the next step. So this just gets it settled and in place. This bottom piece, we're going to just glue the face so it attaches well as the base. And again, it can hang over just a little because we're going to trim it in the final step. Let's just make sure we're lined up really well. Okay, yep, okay. That's it. We let that dry and we'll trim it in the next level. All right, after we let the glue dry overnight on each of the 4 wings, we're going to run them through the router table with a flush trim bit to just clear off the excess, and then they're ready for prime and paint. And we're ready for priming. As I'm showing you here, this is probably my favorite primer that I use on anything, whether it's plastic or wood or metal. It makes the next coat, the final coat, go on smooth and clean. Then after the primer dries, we just add the color of choice. We picked the red that matched the trim and cabinets in the chief's office. All right, now it's time to put the coin pins in, which are those 5mm shelf pegs from Rockler that I talked about. I drill the holes, even though it's 5mm, which is .201 inches, I cut them about 0.195, so it's a really tight friction fit, and they don't pop out at all. So now you just got to do this 128 times, and then we're all set and we can go on to the next step. With the primer, paint, and the shelf pins complete, this is what the layout would look like with the 4 wings ready for the centerpiece. I wanted to take a second to talk about different ways to display coins. What you see on the screen is the traditional way most coin displays are made, with the slat and rail. The coin is held up there. There's a couple of things that, while it's really simple to do, it's the easiest method to follow. There's a few reasons I don't really care for this. One, it really does cut off the bottom 10% or so of the coin. So if there are words that are important to read, you simply can't see them. The second thing is, if you zoom in and you look at a couple of the odd shaped coins, They just can't handle odd shaped coins. It has to be flat or perfectly round. That's the only way these slats go. That's why I go to the pins. And I wanted to show you why I choose pins versus the flat rails to hold coins. This is another version of a fire department challenge coin display I have. This one particular one is backlit, so you can turn it on and you can be backlit. So for instance, in the traditional one, if you try to have a shield, it doesn't hold well on a regular shelf, but as you can see, it just sits perfectly fine between the pins. This challenge coin is from the Super Bowl security from the FBI agents. So again, this one just sits perfectly flat across those pins. Here's another odd shape, this helmet. Again, it just sits, you can't do this on a flat shelf. A 9/11 challenge coin sits on there. Even a more odd one, odd shape, this fighter jet. Again, it just sits right on there. Fireman's jacket, that one will sit again right on the pins. We got another odd shaped shield, sits right up there. Fire department one with axes, again, it just sits right on the pins. Good to go. A Maltese cross. This one, if you put it on a regular shelf design, it'll cut off the word prayer, but as you can see, we just kind of set it right up in there, and there we go, just like that. And another medallion, like a helmet medallion, just sits right up on there, and you can read all the letters on it. So again, this is why I choose pins versus the flat shelf design. You can buy the pretty standard 5mm shelf pins or shelf supports anywhere, including Amazon. You can get them relatively cheap. I like these from Rockler. These are probably the beefiest, classiest looking shelf pins that I found. I'll leave a link in the description. All right, if you made it this far, this is the part you're probably waiting for. How did he put all that epoxy inlay to match the color of the picture he was given? So let's go through those steps. First and foremost, the most important part is when you set up the job, make sure you set it up as a double-sided operation. That's to ensure that the alignment for the holes on the bottom will match up for the wings that you previously created. There are other videos on how to set that up. It's pretty straightforward once you do it the first time. The next thing I did is I set up each thing on a layer, starting with the bitmap. This is the picture you saw at the very beginning of the video. That is what from the Fraternal Order of Leatherhead Society that the chief wanted as the centerpiece for his layout. Next thing I did is I created this. You'll see this is the 16-inch circle that sits in the center of the challenge coin display, and these two holes, one at the top and one behind the screen up here, these are the two holes that help you align it when you flip it over and you carve out the backside. And the last thing I did was create all the color tracings. So this is every individual color, from the black to the red to the gray to the white to the orange to the brown. 5 or 6 colors that are in there. So this is every color traced out individually. Yes, you can use this trace bitmap feature. It does a really nice job, but not good enough for very, very fine detail. I wanted to make sure that I had this thing perfectly matched up for all that detail that I was looking for. And then over on the right under tool paths, the very first thing you'll see is the black. I pour the whole black background first. Let that dry, then you pour the red, and then the orange and the white. You can do several colors at a time as long as they're not touching. And when it's all said and done, then you'll end up with, let's go to the 3D view so you can see this here. And we're going to do preview all sides, so you'll see how it's going to end up when we're done. We pour the black, then I do the red and the orange, then I do the white, all the white pieces, the white inlay, then you'll see the gray coming up for the hand, or the brown on the cigar, etc., etc., etc. And it does the backside. So here we are. All right, let's trim away the excess after we did the profile. We'll zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see there is the colors and how well it matches what is on the original picture we started with. And on the backside, you have the 12 pocket holes as well as the lettering for the alignment on the wings that we previously created. All right, let's go get carving and then pouring epoxy. And here we go, carving the black background first for this logo. What you're going to see first is the clearing bit, and then I also do a fine V bit to get the corners and the details very clear. I think the optimal depth that I like to carve these is about 0.14, 0.15. It's deep enough that it hides any grain in the background, and it's thin enough that it cures pretty quickly and there's minimal bubbles that take place. And here's the V-bit job. Again, it's 2 parts for each color, the clearing bit and then the V-bit to give you those crisp, clean corners and curves. And before you put your first drop of epoxy into this carving, I like to coat everything with this sanding sealer. You should coat it with something, whether it's this sanding sealer or something else. Well, it does 2 things. Any epoxy that bleeds over the edge won't bleed into the wood and make it hard to sand out and look like a dirty line. The other thing is it seals the bottom and the sides so that no air comes into the epoxy and you're fighting bubbles the whole time that it's drying. This works really well for me. You may have a better option, but I like the way this one works. Alright, here it is, applying this sanding sealer. You can do this pretty quickly just with a brush. It's easy enough. Just make sure you get deep enough into each crevice and the side of each of the carving. Again, you want to block any place that air bubbles can seep up from the wood into the epoxy and cause bubbles that you're going to have to clean up. Goes pretty darn fast. It dries even quicker, probably 15-20 minutes of drying time, and then you're usually set to pour epoxy. It's pretty fast. Alright, for this black background, I've got about 7 ounces of epoxy mixed and ready to go. And if you haven't used them before, for solid colors like this, I actually prefer pigment paste, and there's some new ones here, like this one from Eye Candy. This is what we use for the black background. And tomorrow, well, on the next pour, you'll see probably in a few seconds, the red for the helmet. So it just takes actually just a small amount of pigment paste. Takes very little, like literally just a dab on there, and we can turn 7 ounces of epoxy into jet black very quickly. Let's do that, get it all off of here. Make sure you mix it all up well. Okay. And now it's the first pour. And then we proceed to popping the bubbles, checking the level. And this is something I didn't plan, but pay attention to that drop that I accidentally put on the untreated area where we didn't put the sanding sealer. You'll see it in the next step, what it looks like the next day. All right, as you can see, we're ready for day 2 of epoxy. We're going to do the red helmet, some white lettering, the brown cigar, some teeth. Some areas you just don't touch, so we can do them kind of independently. Same thing, it'll be 2 jobs, one clearing bit, one fine V-bit on the detail. Again, won't bore you with the whole CNC carve out, but this is just the V-bit getting the fine detail on each of the jobs. And here's all of day 2 carve out. Again, it's the 2-bit operation. It's the clearing bit and the V-bit to get the corners and details. So you can kind of see we're ready for epoxy on the next couple of colors. But over here, I wanted to show you, this is the area where I accidentally spilled that drop, and look at the bleed that's gone through on both sides of that. This is the untreated area. Versus, if you zoom back out, you can kind of see almost no bleed whatsoever on any place that we have treated. All right, today we're going to do a little red, a little white, maybe a little brown. Again, love the eye candy pigment paste. This is going to be the red for the helmet. And again, it only takes just a little dab in there, and you mix it in with the epoxy, and you get very quickly get a nice deep red. Look at that. Okay, next up we're going to do some eye candy white again with the pigment paste. Doesn't take much at all, just a little bit on the stick. Give it a stir. Look at that. Perfect. And for the cigar, a little beaver dust satin coffee. All right, we'll pop the bubbles maybe 1 or 2 more times, and see in a few seconds, or day 3. All right, day 3, let's go. Okay, fast forward here on day 3. We're gonna not bore you with the carving. Put some white in the smoke, white trim in the helmet, the orange on the flame and the tip of the cigar, and we'll come back for day 4. Okay, the white in the helmet, the white in the smoke, the orange on the flame, the white bands on the cigar. We got these done. So that here we are, started day 4. Probably could have done this in 3 days if I had been a little more strategic, but we're gonna do it in 5. So now we're gonna do some gray facial highlights. Let's get on day 4. All right, ready for day 4 pours. You can see we've run the 2 jobs to clean out what's gonna be the gray area. And again, one of my favorites is the pigment paste from Eye Candy. This is Gray Tide. That's going to be the gray components. Again, it doesn't take much at all. Just literally a little dab on a stick. Mix it up. You got a beautiful gray color. Look at that. A little more mixing. Don't have to be too precise here. We're going to sand it off in the end. I know it kind of looks terrible right now. Don't worry about that. Pop the bubbles a couple more times and we're good. Ready for day 5, hopefully the last day. Okay, day 5, one last color. Wrapping it up. Alright, here on the last day of epoxy pouring, I'm just going to show you a quick video of the 2 bits again, the clearing bit and the V bit, to carve out the last color white, and then we'll go right and show you the epoxy. And finally, here on the last day of epoxy pouring, the face finally appears. So now you can see the whole picture. I probably overfilled a little too much. Sanding will take that off. Just takes a little extra sanding, not a big deal. We'll let this dry. Pop the bubbles a few more times, let it dry, flip it over, carve the backside, cut it out, and we're almost done. Okay, last day on the CNC. We've got the board turned over. We've got it set in the alignment holes, so we're sure that it's lined up. And the first thing we're going to do is cut the pocket holes for the threaded inserts. Here we go. Okay, after the threaded insert pocket holes are done, we just got to pop in the inserts. That's it. All right, and the very last thing on the CNC, we flipped it back over, so we're on the face is showing. We're going to run the profile job and cut it out of the material, and then we're done on the CNC. Then we just got finishing to go. So here's a quick time-lapse video sanding the excess epoxy down, starting with 80 grit, 120, 180, and going to 220. The reason I go to 220 is so that I can do a tabletop epoxy clear coat on top, and you'll see how fast this goes. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. And here's a quick still shot after all the sanding's done, so you can kind of see how clean the finish is. It'll actually pop a lot more once we get the clear coat, the tabletop epoxy over the top. All right, we're ready for the tabletop epoxy clear coat. I actually like to do this in two steps. First step, I put a really thin coat of Total Boat penetrating epoxy. Reason I do that, it seems to seal the wood pores a lot better, so I'm not fighting bubbles at the end as it's drying. So I just mix up a little bit of that, and honestly, just kind of paint it on everything, and it seals the grain, kind of like the sanding sealer did when we did the epoxy. So this will just keep us from fighting bubbles. I want to emphasize, don't worry about this brushed on finish looking uneven or bumpy. Doesn't matter. When you put the tabletop epoxy on the top, it's going to cover it all. Just make sure you get all the sides, every edge that's going to get tabletop epoxy, get this coating on there. All right, it's been about 4 hours since we applied the penetrating epoxy sealer. And again, don't worry about how uneven it looks. We just want it to do its job to fill all the pores so that we're not fighting bubbles as we're put the final coat on. And then here we go. We're just going to apply this final top coat epoxy. The total boat tabletop epoxy is self-leveling. I'm just giving it a little assistance here with a scraper. Spread it around and make sure we cover and drip over all the edges effectively so that it gets a really nice complete cover. And finally, just a little touch up by hand. Make sure that all the edges are completely covered. And lastly, go through a couple of rounds of just popping the bubbles, making sure nothing else pops up through the grain. We should be good, and then we let it dry. All right, tabletop epoxy is done, dried. I sanded the drips off the back, and here it is finished, ready to assemble. The first thing I'd like to do is set the centerpiece down, face down on a soft cloth so we don't mar that surface. And then we start assembling each of the wings. Again, paying attention to A, B, C, D. It's much easier to line up this way. And the holes are absolutely perfectly aligned because they're all done with a CNC. And as the very final step, we're adding some hardware here to get this mounted on the wall. A couple of rubber bumpers at the bottom, rubber feet from like cutting boards, and at the top we're going to add a couple of picture hangers on 16-inch centers. So you tell me how we did in the comments. Did we capture the logo? I think so. Looks pretty nice. And here is a picture of it on the Chief's wall as well. Thanks for staying to the end. Appreciate you watching. Bye for now.